Welcome in the arena. My name's Allyson Klein. Today, we've got a really exciting episode for you. It's our AI Infra Insight series, where we're going into depth with practitioners from across the AI landscape and how they're seeing AI transform their businesses. Today, we've got Senthil Padmanabhan, VP of Engineering for the Global Commerce and Developer Platform at eBay with us. Welcome, Senthil.
Oh, thanks for having me, Alice. I'm very excited to be here.
So, Cynthia, let's just start with an introduction of you. This is the first time that you've been on the show. Why don't you just talk a little bit about your background and what you do at eBay?
Sure. As you probably know, that I run engineering for global commerce and developer platform. So what does it mean is, by global commerce, I'm responsible for engineering end-to-end experiences for all the major categories in eBay. And by developer platform, I'm responsible for the platform that powers both our internal and external developers. So eBay has a large public API portfolio, which is used by our sellers and partners. So that's all managed by my team. And I'm also responsible for internal productivity and engineering throughput. So I run the internal platform too, which all our developers work on.
Now, you were a keynote speaker at the AI Infra Summit this fall. I'm very excited to see your speech, but why don't you talk about the panel that you're going to be putting together in terms of AI at work in e-commerce? And what are the key things that we'll be talking about in terms of what it actually takes to move from deploying AI internally and having it show up in a meaningful way for your customers?
The biggest thing that matters to any e-commerce player or any e-commerce marketplace these days is iteration velocity. So how quickly can you ship high quality products to your customers is what matters, right? Because we are in an extremely competitive space. There is a ton of ideas to add value to your customers. How soon you take it to them, right? That has become the key differentiator in many marketplaces these days, because there is so much of expectations from our customers and we need to fulfill them. And the only way to fulfill them is to move faster, is to ship products that they need in high quality at a very high speed, right? That's going to be the key differentiator. So this is where AI is going to play the role, right? And again, we don't have to do AI for the sake of AI, right? We have to ship products to the customer faster. That's one requirement. If you don't do it with AI, also it's fine. But what is intrinsically going to happen is the only way we can ship it faster is going to be with this new technology of all the AI capabilities that we are getting these days. So that is where I would say that AI is going to be a primary driver there. That's what the way we work, the way engineers work, the way product works, design works, everything is going to change. And that's a key lever in which AI will help us in terms of e-commerce. There is, of course, this whole thing on how the customer experience itself will change with AI. I mean, but that's a whole product angle to it. But at least from engineering, that's how I'll say it, Alison.
Now, Cynthia, there's been a lot of talk and maybe a lot of hype that AI is going to replace software developers from a standpoint of having to code. And while there is a growing interplay between AI and software engineers, what does that look like at both ends of the equation from a standpoint of upstream and planning and alignment of what actually is wanting to be developed and downstream once code is actually written? How do you see that full work stream coming together?
See, this has been the wide awakening now, right? Everybody in this in the valley and across the globe is now feeling this pressure of the upstream and downstream. That's exactly what you mentioned, Alison, right? See, historically, coding was considered as the biggest bottleneck in a product development lifecycle, right? Because it was a cognitively heavy task. Although coding only took, if you take 25 to 30% of the actual time, it was still the currency in which we used to estimate projects. It was still the currency in which everybody were pivoted across, right? Like that was the core of everything. Okay, how much time an engineer is going to spend coding? Then we then multiply that, or we have a factor of that. Okay, then testing takes X number of time, product design takes that much time and things. But now that is going to be collapsed, right? And that's already getting collapsed, right? So coding is not the bottleneck anymore. So what happens is the pressure goes both upstream and downstream, right? And in our case, especially from where I'm sitting, right? So this means that the product design and business has to operate differently, right? The original way our business teams or product team used to work is that the engineering bottleneck was the rate of speed, right? They know that an engineer is going to take 2 weeks, for example, to code up this feature. So I have up to 2 weeks to onboard this big seller onto the platform, or I have 2 weeks to design this thing for them, right? Because I'll be ready for them by the next sprint. That's gone now, right? So now they are going to be seeing the same pressure. Okay, we are waiting on them, sort of a thing, and they cannot do a lousy job either, right? They have to go and see a high quality design and high quality research on what the customers need. we are already seeing that happen slowly, right? And hopefully the way they are incorporating AI into their workflow is going to accelerate that throughput too. So that's one thing. And now the downstream, which comes back to engineering, is um, all our CI/CD pipelines and our the whole delivery network, right, which happens after the code is produced, right, starting with PR review. PR review is a big bottleneck for us right now, right, because we need a human to ultimately see what's going on, and suddenly you have 10x more code to review, but we don't have 10x more people to review the code. And that is slowly becoming the bottleneck too. Yeah, we can use a AI PR reviewer, and that space is also now expanding because originally it was all about code authorship. Even the frontier labs are seeing the same pressure now, where they need people to go and review the code, right? And you need an agent that is as good, or like that sort of complements and plays a critique of the code authored. And many people use different techniques, like they use one frontier model to do the code authoring and another frontier model to do the code review and things like that. So that space is still getting evaluated. And then the whole CI/CD pipeline, where it was all developed for a human throughput, right? Where humans had like some hours of day, like how much they can work in a day, and they sleep and things like that, right? But that's not the case with agents. And so do we have the infrastructure where you can support this whole thing, where your staging environment, your production environment, your A/B testing environment, all of them work or not, is a big question. And that's still an ongoing exercise in major companies, I would say.
Now, you're introducing agents. Obviously, agents and developers are working together towards the common goals. But how do you ensure that agents within a large enterprise like eBot, they are working from a reliable standpoint? And what kind of guardrails do you need to put in place? And how does that look from a standpoint of your infrastructure challenges as well? Because they consume a lot of compute cycles.
Yes. Um, See, the way we have to look at infrastructure has to go to a complete rethinking now. In the past, software was for humans or created by humans, right? Now let's change that assumption, and let's say the future is software is for agents, meaning that agents create and consume them. Then it needs a new type of infrastructure to support it, right? So that, for me, as many people have spoken in the industry, right, it opens up three new primitives, right? We need an infrastructure to build and run your agents, right? Every company needs to have an equivalent of an open class sort of an environment within, which gets the right context for that company through all the systems that is there. And then it has to have a sandbox environment. It has to have a gateway environment where you can go and call the models, different models based on different cost structure and things like that. It has to do the normalization. It has to do observability and things like that. So we need this whole infrastructure in place to build and run agents. So that's one. The second one is we also need an infrastructure for the agents to deploy their output to, which we just talked about, which is the downstream impact, right? So that infrastructure has to be rebuilt now, so that agents can come and put their deployments into a place where they can test it, where they can work around with it with a low latency, and also do it at a scale that we have not seen before. And lastly, the infrastructure itself should be agentic, right? We see in the past what used to happen, right? We roll out code, we look at humans look at the logs, and then they figure out, okay, some issue is going on, okay, I need to go and fix it. The latency is more, less. But now we cannot scale if we do that. So the infrastructure itself should be self-healing in a way that it understands what's happening, and it suggests the human, oh, this is why you suddenly have an increase in your 4xx, like HTTP error codes. Your latency spiked suddenly, and this is the code that caused it. Maybe this is the fix for it, and things like that. So I think it needs a complete rethink of the infrastructure.
Now, once infrastructure is in place, let's just assume that you've got that all figured out.
Yeah.
And your engineering teams, your agents are working within it. Where does human judgment still matter most when we look at the human equation in terms of solution delivery? And what does that mean in terms of how you're structuring your teams for development?
I mean, I believe that human variance is going to be the key differentiator going forward. Right? See, this is not an exclusive technology, right? To some extent, this is like Coca-Cola, Coke, right? Like you pay $1, you get everybody in the world gets the same Coke, right? It's same here, right? You pay $20 a month, you go and get access to the frontier models, and you pay $200 a month, you get the model that the largest companies in the world have access to, right? It's not exclusive. Everybody in the world has access to this in the tip of their hands. So if you just use AI straight out of the box, right, you're going to get baseline results. So you'll regress to the mean. But however, if you will apply your creativity and distinguish yourself by providing the right context, the context has to be well defined. It has to be having a true purpose and emotionally connect with your customers. Then that's where magic happens, right? So that's the differentiator going forward. Human variance is the differentiator because this is not an exclusive technology. Everybody has access to it.
Now, eBay as a online marketplace obviously has a huge component around payments, and that means that the the requirements for security on every transaction is really high. And just privacy of data, all of the things that come with running an enterprise online storefront. What does it take to deploy agentic AI in that kind of environment? And what should other engineering leaders think about in terms of what they might be overlooking in terms of security?
Security is a big aspect that is also progressing as we talk. Um, I mean, the identity model of agents is still a big question mark, right? Even like a couple of days back, we heard news that there are some incidents happening on how somebody were able to circumvent the agent identity and steal some information. So to me, the way I look at it is there are four actors in this model, right? One is the agent itself, which does all the things, and then there is this secrets or like agent secrets and keys or API keys where agent has to use to make these API calls, so your system related stuff, and all the secrets that are there, which everybody has in their Mac in their computers, right? And then there is this generated code. The agent generates a code. That's another actor. And lastly, there is also this environment in which all of these things run, right? The fundamental thing we have to do or we are doing here is like the environment in which the agent as well as the secrets and the keys run and the environment in which the agent generated code runs are totally separate. And the environment in which the agent generated code runs cannot talk to the environment where the agent runs, right? The agent can talk to the other environment to push the code in, but the vice versa is not possible. So that is the first line of defense that we are doing, right? The second is also whenever an external call is being made from our infrastructure, we have a proxy like a egress proxy that inspects all these requests and makes sure we inject the credentials for those requests. Even though we have a separate environment, even in that environment, something can be stolen, right? Make sure that none of that goes in the headers in the request that is there because we have a proxy that's there, which will prevent that from happening. Simon Willison, who talks a lot about LLMs, defined this called the lethal trifecta, right? It's a deadly combination when you have private data, external communication, and untrusted content. So if you follow the primitives I just mentioned earlier, then you don't have to worry about this deadly combination. So you escape from them.
Nice. Now, we've talked a lot about your internal view of driving code more efficiently and taking advantage of AI to really transform how you manage your teams. But there's another aspect too, which is what can you actually deliver to the customer experience? And so let's talk about that in terms of the buyers and sellers on eBay. What are they seeing differently now that you've injected AI into your code development, and how are they benefiting?
So that is, I mean, let me talk about some of the experiences that are changed because of, right? I talked about iteration velocity, which is invisible to the customer in terms of experience, but they are seeing the features much quicker. But in terms of the customer experience itself, right, it had a massive impact both on our sellers and buyers. Let me talk about our sellers first. See, this whole AI has democratized the listing flow, especially for our C2C sellers, right? These are sellers who just sit in their homes, like they have some things in their garage, they want to get rid of it. They do not have access to the business sellers or professional sellers who have all these big equipments to list, like take all the good photographs of your items, a warehouse where you can stack them up, like you have this whole logistics machine running for them. They don't have anything, and they have this whole team which can use APIs to go and list your items with the perfect data. But with our new listing flow, it's called the magical listing flow that we call it internally, where you just take a picture, it fills up all the information about that item, including the title, which is which also increases your sales. It gives you the perfect price guidance on what the price should be so that you have a sale as soon as possible you're listed, along with the description and other aspects and things like that. So that has just been a game changer for our C2C sellers, right? You just need a phone and any item in your, I mean, since eBay, fortunately, we have 30 years of data that we can use for this information, where pretty much anything that can be sold on eBay, right? So you just have to take a picture of that item, and we've probably seen that somewhere in our 30-year history, and we'll make sure that we give the right price for you and do it.
So there is a downstream side effect, good side effect of this to our buyers, because buyers are getting more structured data, which was usually unstructured, right? If you're shopping on clothing in eBay, we make sure that your size is accurately applied because we know those information. For example, eBay makes sure that every auto part that you buy can guaranteed fit your vehicle. This is a very complex problem. That's what AI is trying to solve for us, right? And on average, a car has 30,000 parts. And there are like 290 million cars, I guess, in America. Right? The combination, you need to imagine, like it's a tough problem to solve, and AI has just made this problem easier for us to solve.
Now, looking ahead, obviously there's still some constraints in play, and I want to talk to you about that. And then what makes you most optimistic about what's ahead for AI integration?
See, there is perception and reality, right? And reality is much more nuanced and much more complex than we think, right? Launching a prototype, Allyson, is easier, right? Like I can quickly run something, I can quickly build a demo, and then I can then quickly take it to and show it to you, send a link to you, okay, play around with it, or launch an app for you, right? So AI, I do believe that AI can take you to 90%, right? It can take you to 90% of where you are, right? I mean, people talk about this last mile problem, and that's really true, because the last 10% is where you need to make sure that your service is taking 1 million requests per minute and it responds within 700 milliseconds latency, and it has to do it even in the when the traffic is at its peak, even when one of the data centers is down. When this is complex engineering, and this is where the human variance and all those things come into play. Right. The optimistic part of it is every time a new model releases, they keep raising the floor, they keep raising the bar. But again, since the bar is raised for everybody, the more differentiating things that you do on top of it is what is going to matter.
Yeah.
So my thing is that it makes it just increases the floor, and that's the optimistic part of this. But there are still a ton of opportunities for human to build on top, which will be the differentiator.
That's amazing. Now, I know the AI Infra is one of the best shows of the year. I've been going to it since it started. I'm really looking forward to it in September. Obviously, your panel is going to be a big hit, but what other conversations and perspectives are you looking forward to from getting at the conference?
See, I believe this conference, I do selective conferences a year, and the main thing about conference, it's a great learning opportunity for me to understand the real world impact, right?
Mhm.
See, keeping up with what's happening in the AI world itself is a full-time job these days. So
Right.
it keeps changing a lot, right? You go for a week for vacation, you come back, you're completely outdated. You don't know what's happening. So these conferences help me in particular to separate the signal from the noise. See, there's so many things happening, but not everything applies to my line of work, to the business that I'm involved in and takes. So I'm really looking forward to attending this conference to make sure that what's happening with my peers, what truly matters, what is really making an impact, and get those learnings back to my company and add value to my customers.
Well, Cynthia, it's been a real pleasure interviewing you today. I think that the pace of innovation in AI is going at such a pace that it's so important to hear from practitioners like you about what you're seeing from the front lines, and what you're doing in terms of that sharing is going to, impact a lot of different companies as they go on the same journey. So thank you for taking the time. One final question for you. I know that people who are listening online are going to want to learn more. So where can they get in contact with you or find out more about what eBay is doing with AI?
I'm active both on X and LinkedIn,
Mhm.
so you can share it in the like in the podcast notes after this. But that's where you can reach out to me, and my DMs are open.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was so much fun.
Thank you, Allyson. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed.